Eagles Entertainment.
The Eagle Eye in the Sky is fueled by Gatorade, the official sports drink of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Anything that moves, I don't care who it is. Let's go. Give me everything you got. Play fast, play hard. Let's beat these boys tonight in their house. It's party time. It's party time. Hey, here we go. Touchdown!
You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right, another week, and we are talking OLine today as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and as always, I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 253. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I chat with a guy who's been on this show before, one of the best voices really in the media space when it comes to offensive line play, and that's because he trains some of the best linemen in the business. That is Duke Manyweather. Duke does really great work with some of the best linemen in the NFL. We're talking, obviously, the Eagles' Lane Johnson, but Teron Armstead from the Saints, Mitchell Schwartz from the Chiefs, Trent Brown, Andrews Pete, Ryan Jensen. The list goes on and on and on. Zach Martin. Let's not waste any more time, though, because we really dive into a bunch of different areas of O-line play. Let's dive into our chat now in Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Well, happy to be joined once again here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Duke Manyweather, a guy that joined the show last summer, back in 2019, talking O-line play. We were down in Dallas-Fort Worth. We were talking through the OLine Mastermind Summit. Well, this year, I was not able to attend, but the third annual OLine Mastermind Summit did take place. Duke, thanks so much for joining us, man. And again, I've told you this offline, but it killed me to not be down there for the third installment of just such an awesome event. I did see a lot of the video clips that you guys posted on social media. Tell me what I missed. What happened down at the third annual Mastermind Summit, and what can we expect for the future?
Oh, man, definitely uncharted territory with everything that's going on here in 2020. We saw more of sharing of experience. And so, in essence, for a lot of these young guys that were in the room, a lot of rookies were in the room, a lot of first and second year players that would have took the next leap with this off-season program were in the room. A lot of guys that, are going into their final couple of years in college were in the room. So what they were able to hear this year was some of the experiences and some of the nuances of how to prepare and how to deal with adversity and the mental performance piece. So I think we saw kind of a different tone than the past couple of years. It was geared towards more preparation and, hey, we're going to all beat this together and we're going to get better doing it. Offensive line is about having one another's back and really being on the same page of communication, having, 5 sets of eyes, 10 eyes total, all focused on the same thing. And so that was kind of the message that we put out. And there was an overwhelming response to a lot of guys in that room saying that they needed it. Like they were so looking forward to, just the fellowship and to get away from the isolation and just the Groundhog Day type mentality that we've all kind of been in since March. So that was really rewarding to kind of hear that a lot of people were on the same page. This year, we definitely leveled up in terms of some of the guests that were there, some of the experiences that were shared, and I'm excited already for the fourth annual. I think in normal circumstances, what this year showed us is that this year had the potential to be really big, which sets us up for the fourth annual OLine Masterminds next year. Will be huge. I think we'll break uncharted ground. I think we'll climb the new heights and really continue to reset that standard of professional development in which we have the past 3 years.
Yeah, it was such an awesome event last year, and just so much. Like you talk about, like the I think a lot of people expect it to be all on field, and certainly there was plenty of on field. But to me, like the stuff that was more gripping and that was more valuable, certainly to me, but I know to a lot of the young guys in the room as well. You talked about the college and the young NFL guys, the rookies, the second year guys. Was those experiences that the vets in the room were able to share and say, like, look, this is what you're going to face in the league. These are the troubles you're going to face. All of us face adversity. Here's how you come to overcome it. I thought that stuff was really powerful last year.
Yeah, just small things like how to handle conflict with teammates, how to handle conflict with coaches, how to deal with the media, how to deal with injuries, stuff like that. All the stuff that you're 100% going to face in your first year, probably in your first week of being in the building, that never gets talked about. And so if you're not prepared for those things, it can really throw you through a loop. We talk so much about, working on your craft and, working on your physical state. But one of the things with OLine Mastermind is the mental. You could train your body, you could train your craft, but we can't forget to train the mind. Gary Fraser, my mental performance coach, always reminds me of that. Gary had some great tidbits there last year, and really left us with a lot of good tidbits this year, even though he wasn't able to be in attendance. So, we take that to heart, that we realize that, yes, offensive line specifically is very much a physically demanding position, but also the mental part cannot be lost in it. So we try to make sure that we constantly harp on that and ingrain that the mental piece is really, really important.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's like we talk about it on this podcast, talk about it over in the Journey to the Draft podcast as well. It's like, all these guys have all the ability in the world. The guys that, quote unquote bust in the NFL, it's not because, more often than not, it's not because of ability. It's because of, their inability to be able to cope with some of those things you talk about off the field. And I thought even hearing from some of those guys that faced some of that adversity with their first team or their second team, and maybe it didn't work out, and then you're seeing them, hey, like this was a huge learning point for me, and now the arrow's pointing up on them again. To me, like that's what it's all about. It's just so interesting to be able to hear it from that perspective. So yeah, they're just awesome stuff down there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Is that just getting the different perspectives, and just let's face it, football is a very alpha domain and realm, and it's okay to not be okay with a lot of things. And I think OLine Masterminds provides not only a safe place, but it provides a platform to be able to present and ask questions that in a room or in a building may be seen as dumb, but a lot of people may not know. And so I always try to open the platform and break the ice by saying there's no dumb questions, because I guarantee if there's a question that you think that is dumb, there are some veterans in this room that don't have the answers to it, that they have been purposely avoiding asking that question in their own setting. And we end up seeing that. And typically what ends up happening is that first day, people kind of fill it out. And then after we break for that first day, I'll get a ton of text messages about, hey, let's touch on this. I didn't want to say it. And then that second day becomes a little more authentic, and it spreads like wildfire. But the whole purpose of getting in the room under the true meaning of the mastermind principle, as Napoleon Hill talked about, is to really share ideas and streamline success. He talks about when there's, two or more kindred minds and spirits that are in the same trajectory, that success becomes inevitable and it cuts down the probability of failure. And so I think that's really important. There's nothing new that we're doing here. It's just a lot of people fail to read the history and really fail to understand that success leaves clues. And so that's the whole purpose and the premise behind OLine Masterminds, is to, hey, we've got some of the top guys in the game sharing ideas and bringing up that next generation. That way we're pushing the envelope in terms of offensive line development and making the position better than we found it, and continuing to really foster a positive learning environment. So that is so important for me to really advance the position, is to just kind of be like kind of that beacon and that moderator to, spark conversation and spark new ideas and give perspective from, a evaluation, a coaching and a training and a development standpoint. But it's always going to be about the guys in the arena, the guys that line up every damn Sunday and put it online and put their hands in the dirt. I'm going to learn way more from them than I can give them, because there's more of them, and they've actually have done it at the highest level in live conditions. And, so it's a great synergy between my experience and then the guys in the arena.
So last year you came on the show, like I mentioned, when we were down there, in Frisco, and we talked about just the creation of the event. You and Lane getting together, putting your heads together as he was watching the NFL Top 100 series on NFL Network. you've got a really close relationship with Lane. You've trained him for years. And I want to just ask you, like, he's been one of the best tackles in the NFL for a handful of years now. Obviously, every single year, these guys are all trying to get better, in little areas. What are some of the areas that you've seen Lane improve just over the last year or two, even while he has been considered one of the best tackles in the game?
Well, Lane's attention to detail is pretty phenomenal. You're not going to find a guy that's more dedicated to all of those three things that I said you can train: your body, your craft, and your mind. Lane is always looking for ways to get better. Lane suffered a pretty significant injury this year. Blunt force trauma. He had his guy locked up. Powell rode on him. If that happened to anybody else, it would have been a broken ankle, torn ACL, and probably more. But because of the work Lane puts in away from the facility, I guarantee if we were to FaceTime Lane right now, he's doing something for his body with mobility. And because he does and pays attention to all that and really takes that to heart, what Lane understands is that he goes, man, we only got a small window to do this at a high level. Once it's gone, it's gone. Lane is probably about the most realistic and realist person that you'll get. He takes nothing for granted, and he understands that that window is so small. So one thing that I've seen with the improvement of Lane is just that sense of urgency to realize that, hey, we don't have many of these left. And so Lane is always constantly working, and that's why he's the best right tackle in the league right now. Last year was probably one of his better years that people don't give him credit for. And again, if that had happened to anybody else in the league, we would have been talking about a guy whose career was probably over, because that injury on Monday Night Football would have taken out a lot of people. I've seen it take out a lot of people in careers, especially how he got rolled up laterally with that type of force that went into his left ankle and left leg.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things I pulled from OLine Masterminds last year was the work guys can do away from the field in terms of injury prevention and things like that. And I know that Lane is very passionate about that stuff. We had Lane on the show a couple of weeks ago before this third annual OLine Masterminds. And, I talked with him about the relationship with he and Jason Peters. What was it like not having him in the building this offseason? Was he kind of being viewed now as kind of the elder statesman in that room? Lane really well. How tight he and JP are. What does it mean for him to be able to get Jason Peters back in the building, and for all those other young guys in that room to be able to get a guy like Jason Peters back in the building here for the 2020 season?
Oh, man, it's huge, especially with the adversity that, again, as we're going through as a country, as each team is going to go through as individual organizations, losing, potentially – not losing potentially, but you losing arguably the best right guard in the league in Brandon Brooks. I mean, hell, this year for Jason Peters with no true offseason, with the guys meshing, getting Jason Peters back in the building and back in that O-line room in any capacity is absolutely huge. I think you still got a strong veteran presence. Brandon Brooks is going to be around still as just the type of guy that B. Brooks is. Blaine bringing along the young guys, Kelsey bringing along the young guys. I think it's huge, especially in today's landscape with those young guys not having a real off-season, an off-season program like that veteran presence. The more veterans, you can almost put, one veteran for each 3 or 4 guys. Now you got veteran presence at every position dang near. So that's going to be very huge for not only bringing some of the young guys along, including Dillard, but, potentially even if a Matt Pryor is competing for that right guard job, with Matt is looking good. He trained with me a little bit this summer. Jason Peters is going to elevate that Eagles O-line room.
So now getting to Jason Peters, obviously, so much been talking about him making that move to the offensive guard spot. You talk about the injury to Brandon Brooks and, JP sliding over to the right side to be able to play next to Lane. People talk all about, making that transition from tackle to guard, but I'd love to get your vantage point on that. Break that down for us. What are the differences from a technical standpoint, and I guess from a mindset standpoint as well, between tackle and guard?
Well, one thing that Jason Peters likes to do at tackle is to really explode off the line and create that space and get to his spot. You're not going to be able to do that at guard. Guard, it happens right now in the pass game. Jason Peters is still physical enough to be able to throw hands or do whatever he needs to do and anchor. He's going to be strong enough. Those guys that accumulate all those snaps, all those starts, and all those years on the left side, having them switch sides is not ideal. But again, a lot of things that Jason Peters has done throughout his career has been outlier type things. So if anybody can do it, it could be Jason Peters. I just still worry about some of the injuries that he's had and some of the patterns that he's kind of created. But it could be a thing that he's worked all off season to bring up some of those imbalances and prepare himself to be able to play that right guard position. So if that's the case, you may see potential smooth transition, but I just still worry about it.
Sure. So we talked about, Jason Peters and the impact he can have on that O-line room. And you know me, Duke, like when I've got a chance to grab your ear, like I'm always going to ask you like some position specific things. I'm always thinking about like big picture, O-line evaluation, projection from college to the NFL. So I've got a couple of those questions here before I let you go. First one is things we see in college, typically with a lot of these linemen. A lot of schools like their guys to be a little bit lighter, obviously, than what we see in the NFL. And so when you've got those lighter linemen, there can be issues with play strength, with, their ability to anchor or with their power. So I want to ask you this. When you're looking at guys projecting from college to the NFL, what is easier to fix over the course of an offseason or, maybe a full calendar year? Is it easier to make a guy stronger so he can better like hold his ground against a bull rush? Or is it easier to make them a little bit more powerful so they can move guys against their will in the run game? Is there one that's harder to do or easier to do than the other?
That's a great question because strength truly is the basis of every athletic movement, and there's no substitute for it. And then power is the functional use of that strength. So a lot of times it's more, you can make guys stronger, but it's very difficult to make guys powerful where they can actually unlock and use that strength. There's a lot of things that come into it. Mobility, actually stability, mobility, and then just a lot of times those neuromuscular re-education of getting those movement patterns to fire and sync once that newfound strength and power is found. And then you talk about things like the core and just being able to body positioning and leverages. All that plays into effect or plays a factor when talking about using that functional strength and with it being the output of power. So there's a couple of different things. I can make a guy stronger immediately. You give me, 6 or 9 weeks, he's gonna be stronger. But to actually be able to use that strength and that in a functional form of power, again, we're talking about body positioning, body control, and then the leverages and just overall being able to trust the technique to be able to output it through that power. So making a guy more functionally powerful could be a challenge. It takes time. In that same regard, it's easier to get a guy stronger and powerful than to fix sloppy footwork.
Sure.
So I know that typically is always the next question, which one's easier to fix? Yeah.
You know me.
Yeah. So if a guy's feet are not right, you can have a guy with athletic and fast feet, but if they aren't efficient, he's not going to be able to do much.
Yep, and that was something that I know you and I talked about last year on the show. Was something that you preach is efficient feet allow for effective hands, and so I kind of wanted to ask you that is what do efficient feet look like on film? For those the listeners that are watching coaching tape, online on Game Pass, and what are some of the telltale signs of a guy that has good feet? I think we can all kind of point out like the guys that have great feet that are the pure dancing bears, but what do good feet or what do efficient feet look like versus a guy who has bad feet?
When you see a guy with efficient feet, they're really definitive in all movement. So they'll take their set and they'll get to exactly where they need to be, and you won't see a whole lot of other movement. Their movement will all be predicated and based off a reaction of what their opponent is giving them. Versus guys that don't have that efficient feet, they'll be dancing around, and you start to see that happy feet type deal. And so we always try to say fast isn't always efficient, but efficient can definitely always be the equalizer to make you just a quick touch faster. And so that's one of the things that you can look at. There's a couple of guys who I like to look at in terms of efficient feet. Again, Jason Peters is one, Lane Johnson the other. Mitchell Schwartz is a great guy that's very efficient with his movement, not a great athlete, so really relies on being efficient. Teron Armstead, really efficient movement. Zach Martin, really efficient with his footwork. I did a film breakdown of Zach Martin versus Fletcher Cox for the
That's right.
Scouting Academy, and it's probably one of my favorite film breakdowns we did. We spent about an hour and 20 minutes with myself and Dan Hatman, and really what you saw there is that Fletcher bought everything that he could, but because Zach's footwork was so efficient, because his body control was on point, there was times where Zach was technically beat, but was always able to recover. So that's kind of what efficient footwork and efficient movement is all about, not really wasting anything and not really taking your feet and really taking your mind to places that don't exist in terms of movement.
Yeah, you mentioned something there with a guy's ability to recover, and to me, like that's been something. And I think it's been through my conversations with you over the last couple of years is like something that has kind of like creeped up the list of things that I'm always looking for. Is like those 3, 4, 5, 6 examples of a guy that he gets beat, but you see his ability to recover. And I think it goes back to something you said a little bit earlier in the conversation about guys that are built structurally strong. If you've got a strong core, if you're athletic enough to be able to recover and kind of govern that strength in your core, you're going to stay up. You're not going to be on the ground all that often. What are some of the things you look for with a guy's ability to be able to recover?
Yeah, I think everything we just touched on, really, not really wasting that movement, being able to feel pressure and fight force with force, being able to reset the hands, re-leverage the hips, not really overextending a lot. Those are all things that I see specifically when scouting and evaluating college guys making that transition. If a guy can consistently do that, then he's going to have a shot to come in immediately and kind of translate that right to a Sunday game. And so those are really the things that I look for in terms of a guy's ability to be able to recover and cover guys up and just really staying half man and staying in proper position where he's never in a totally bad situation.
The Eagles have a handful of really unique physical specimens along the offensive line. You mentioned a few of them already. What is the most important athletic trait in your mind for an offensive lineman? Because we talk about like the combine and the different tests, the different drills, how things are kind of studied from that respect. What is to you, in your mind, the most important athletic trait for an offensive lineman?
Really, I think the more and more that I look at it, it's two, or actually three. It's stability and mobility, and then that functional core strength. Because that functional core strength is what's going to bring it all together and give you the ability to change directions, to not waste any movement, to be able to build your house and be able to leverage, redirect force up on the bull rush, to really be able to strain. You got to be able to strain and finish blocks. And that doesn't always mean putting people on the ground, but just to be able to strain and hold your ground takes a level of core stability and core strength. So those are probably the three most important things that I see. But if we want to talk about from the ground up, again, that efficient feet, a guy that continues to, and this is more of a skill, but is able to get into a functional stance, be able to replicate that over and over again. Guys that are always in position to win the block with their feet, because again, that's going to allow for effective hands. But then as we start to move up the chain, that core strength and core stability.
So you're really active in the media space. You look at you're on social media. You obviously see the evaluations, the scouting reports. Everybody talking about O-line play. Is there a facet of that position that you feel gets talked about too much? That you feels like, man, like I wish people didn't spend so much time talking about this part of offensive line play because it really doesn't match in terms of how much value it actually has to being effective at the position?
A lot of times the measurables, the length, the height, how fast somebody is, all that type of stuff, especially the arm length. When you look at some of the best tackles in the league right now, all of them are below 34 inches in terms of arm length. So to be able to write guys off, he doesn't have over 34-inch arms, he's got to move inside. Why? Again, if we're evaluating, so I think really that's kind of an old school mentality of you want to get a long guy and length. That's great, but you can have a guy with 37-inch arms and he can't block a troll on Twitter if needed to be. Because at the end of the day, again, we talked about some of those traits that really are important, from the ground up. And those are the things that I think need to be valued in evaluation. So evaluation. What do you value in your evaluation? And again, it's ground up traits and not so much that length and things like that.
Yeah, it's a great quote I heard from Vic Fangio. I'm pretty sure it was last summer. He said, "You can have all the tools in the world, it doesn't make you a carpenter." Right? And so I was like, "Yeah,
Nope.
I definitely get that." That one stuck with me. Last question for you, man. I really, really appreciate the time talking O-line here today. There's talk every offseason when it comes to like team building and position value and things like that. Like, all right, what's more important? Is the running back important? Is the linebacker important? When you're looking at the positions on the offensive line, is it harder for you in your mind to find a good tackle, a good guard, or a good center? Like, how do you kind of stack the three positions in terms of like what's hardest to be able to find in terms of a quality starter in the NFL?
All of them have their own unique challenges, but just by sheer numbers, there's only 32 starting centers in the league.
Mm.
And when you look at a lot of the backups, there are significant drop-offs. So I think it's hard to find a really, really good center because, for instance, you look at the Eagles. The Eagles have probably 3 to 4 really good tackles and probably 3 to 4 really good guards.
Yep.
But when you look at the center position, there's Jason Kelsey and then Isaac Sumalo, who kind of can do everything, is probably going to slide in there. And then when you look across the league, there's only a couple of teams that have put themselves in situations to really foster and develop a backup center. I think you saw a couple of years ago with Dallas, with having Joe Looney come in and be adequate and the absence of Travis Frederick. But there's not many. There's typically significant drop-off when you lose your starting center in terms of communication, being able to point the different protections and the run fits and things like that. So you don't want to lose your starting center. I can tell you that right now. But again, all of them are their own positions. And when I say that, even right guard and left guard, I mean,
Yeah.
there's different things that are asked for each side and each position. And so all of them are individually unique and significant in terms of finding replacements and being able to scout and evaluate that specifically based upon what your offensive scheme is and what you're asking those guys to do.
Real quickly, what are some of those differences between like a right guard, left guard, just like surface level stuff?
Well, really, it depends on, again, what you're asked to do. If you've got a right-hand quarterback or left-hand quarterback, typically on the right side, you're asking that right guard to be just a touch more firm, be more of a mauler. That way that pocket is flattened out. A lot of times you'll see the left guards not be as aggressive setting and things of that nature. So it just really depends on what your offensive scheme is. And, you'll hear the term playing on the dish. A lot of times that refers back to the right side a lot, old Howard Mudd concept. So it really just depends, to be honest with you. It really depends on the type of offense. But as I always say is that, like, when you start to go through the positions and you say, all right, name me the top 5 or 6, right guards in the league. Name me the top 5 centers in the league. Name me the top 5 left guards in the league. Top 5 right tackles. Top 5. Well, I can name a lot of good right tackles. I can name a lot of good left tackles. I can name a decent amount of very good right guards. You probably got 5 or 6 like really good elite type centers. But then when you look at, for instance, a position of like left guard, like how many really good left guards are there in the league?
Right.
Like, I mean, when you look at like, oh man, he's, so when you start to look at that and you start to factor that in, like, again, all 5 positions are very much different, so you can't really put them in one box. They're separate. They've got to be scouted and evaluated different. I think you're starting to see that a little bit with, at first, the Pro Bowl. And then, the all-pro selections, they're picking right side and left side. And I think the Pro Bowl is probably going to eventually take suit of that as well, because the right tackles just aren't getting the love in the Pro Bowl voting. And it's a travesty. And I think that all-pro voting has gotten it right the past couple of years in terms of picking a right tackle, a left tackle, a right guard, a left guard, and a center, and not just having, 5 tackles in there or whatever the hell it is for the sake of it. So hopefully the Pro Bowl moves to that direction. That way some of these guys at right tackle aren't getting cheated out of some of those spots because they're very deserving of being Pro Bowl caliber. There's guys who have made all pros and haven't touched a Pro Bowl. And I think there's a problem with that.
Well, Duke, this has been awesome, as expected and as always. Thanks so much for joining us here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Hope to talk to you again soon. Hopefully, we've got football to be able to watch here coming up here in a few weeks. Duke, thanks so much, man.
Fran, always a pleasure, my brother. I'll talk to you soon. Stay safe, and we'll see you down the road.
Great stuff from Duke, and you can follow him on Twitter just like I do, at BigDuke50. And while you're at it, I'm at EaglesXOs. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of our X's and O's content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. And you know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on social media. That is one way to support the show, but the other way is to go into Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating, or even leave us a comment. Look, hopefully we are very, very close to our daily podcast covering training camp practice here for the Eagles. It's a little bit of a different format than what we normally do on a weekly basis, but that's going to be the idea. Once training camp practices do get into high gear, we'll be here every single day. So if you've got any questions or comments in the meantime, feel free. Jump on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Leave us a rating. Leave us a comment. We'll hit on it here on the show. Really great stuff this week from Duke. Thanks so much to him. And to me, real quick, before we close, just wanted to talk about the move from Jason Peters from left tackle to right guard. And obviously, look, there is some projection there, right? We're talking about a guy who has done one thing at one position for a decade plus at an extremely high level in the NFL, and he's going to have to flip things around a little bit when you're talking from going from the left side to the right side. And obviously, your set points are going to change a little bit when you go from tackle to guard as well. So certainly some changes. Jason Peters, if anybody's going to be able to do it, he's one of those guys that you expect, he's going to be able to make that transition. If not, that's why you like to have those versatile pieces along the offensive line. That's why versatility along the O-line is so important, because now you've got the ability to kind of tinker and say, okay, well, if this doesn't work, we can move these pieces around and really kind of make sure that we can get the best 5 guys on the field. And so to me, it goes back to why versatility is so important along the offensive line. No question that after Brandon Brooks' injury, bringing a guy like Jason Peters in certainly makes the group as a whole better. Not even just the top 5, but your top 7, your top 8, your top 9 certainly get better. There's a lot of young guys in the trenches on this Eagles team. Can't wait to be able to see them up close in person here this summer for the start of training camp. So again, thanks so much to Duke. Thanks to all of you out there for your continued support of this show and all the rest of our podcast offerings on PhiladelphiaEagles.com. All that being said, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. For everybody here at the Duffy House, I am Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.